children and say, no, don't bang the glass, Timmy. Again, another use of kind of humor. So that's kind of pathos there. Appeal to humor doesn't work. If we click this link, though, I mean, I would assume that this is going to be something about why zoos exist and that the stated reason is not actually the actual reason, right? But when I click that link, all that takes me to is the Guardian's page about articles on things that are related to zoos. So that is not research at all. So unless you click the links, you don't really know what's on the other side. You might be assuming that's proof, but that's not necessarily true. Right. Now he does, talk about the argument that they have educational merit. So he does mention quite a few of the reasons why people support zoos, and then he tries to refute them. Right? He tries to give reasons that says why this isn't credible. And so in this one, he basically says that we don't need zoos for education because we have things like David Attenborough's Planet Earth that shows animals, all that you could ask for in their natural habitat with added drama and narrative arcs, right? So if we have this, why do we need to see them in prison? So you have to ask yourself, is that an accurate analogy, right? So analogy is comparing two different things and saying they're alike. So he's saying going to the zoo or watching the Planet Earth series is just as effective as going to an actual zoo when it comes to educating kids about the natural habitats and drama and all of that, right? That could be a false analogy. It's not certainly going to be true of all kids. Some kids can watch a video and might enjoy it, right? I'm horribly allergic to just about everything. And so being up close to a lot of animals or out in the open, it's usually just sneezing and miserable, right? So maybe I prefer watching it on a video because, I burn easily out in the sun, that kind of stuff, right? But there are a lot of people who need that hands-on experience. I would think that seeing a lion just within a few feet of me, surrounded obviously by a fence, is more exciting than seeing a lion on TV, right? So I don't think that analogy is necessarily true. I think we got a false analogy there. And again, if you remember that Donna Wolfert-Cross, that is a kind of propaganda, but it's also a logical fallacy, right? That these two things aren't really similar. They may have some similarities, but they're different in very significant ways. So I might pull out the false analogy. And he also comes back to that here at the end when he talks about YouTube videos right here, that the kids get excited about things they can see in the flesh is ridiculous, that they're obsessed with things that don't even exist. And so seeing something on YouTube is just as good. That's kind of in the same vein as that first one. And so again, I think you could pick out the false analogy and have these two examples of where he's really trying to say they're the same thing, but they're not, right? That could be your entire paragraph about propaganda or fallacy, right? And so now he goes back to his personal experience, right? Going to SeaWorld, right? And look at, again, part of the ethos is appropriate vocabulary, right? So, and again, being fair-minded, sincere, and knowledgeable. And so look at the word choices. Here is another analogy he's making. He is saying that zoos are prisons, right? He uses captivity. He uses prison several times, right? He might even use incarcerated or something like that somewhere. So you have to ask yourself, that is a very emotional appeal. So he's actually using pathos there. Because again, the idea of these animals being imprisoned, right? Now, technically, yeah, they are captive, right? They're not allowed to come and go, wherever they want, right? But is it the same as prison, where prison is a punishment, right? Prisoners are not necessarily really taken care of except for the bare minimum, where animals in zoos are mostly taken well care of, they're well fed, what they need and all that, right? So again, is that, there are some similarities, but are there differences in real significant ways? I would say that, again, this is an emotional appeal. He's intentionally choosing language that is going to look bad for zoos, right? So again, here's this word, bombards you with messages preserving marine life, right? So think of that word bombard. That is a very aggressive word. So instead of saying that they present you or inform you, he says bombard. So again, think about the way he uses language here to prejudice us against these things, right? And then again, here's again talking about, you saw a 2-minute video about saving dolphins and a 10-minute demonstration of how the park has managed to enslave them. So again, enslave and get them to perform tricks. I wondered about the message behind getting the dolphins to pull some kids around in a boat almost as much as I wonder why my own children hadn't been offered that experience. So it's kind of a humorous there, showing the kind of contradiction that he didn't like it, but he also wouldn't have minded if his own kids had that experience. Again, he's making an interesting point here. And so I think before you would believe this, you would have to go and you'd have to look at, are dolphins harmed by being made to perform tricks, right? We know that dolphins are very social animals. We know that they, are around humans out in the wild. You go out and in the beach and dolphins will come and swim up and want to play with you. They're very intelligent. So just because they perform tricks does not mean that they don't want to. So again, you'd have to look into that. Also, you'd have to look to the, why do zoos have children interact or people interact with some of the animals? It's probably a way to build an emotional connection, and that way people are more likely to support conservation and protecting these animals because they've had a positive interaction with them, right? And so again, he gives a very nefarious view of this, that this is bad. There might be more to this story. So this might be an example of card stacking, where he does give us something that is true, 10-minute demonstration with tricks, 2-minute video, but maybe he's leaving out, we could even Google So now here, World Animal Protection, that's probably going to be a site that's against dolphins in captivity, right? So again, we have to look for a place that is going to be neutral, right? So again, here are a lot of places that say that they don't like it. They're forced to perform, right? So we would have to do a lot of research to make sure that we're not finding somebody that's going to be an objective scientific look and not somebody's opinion. So let's look here. So this person obviously is not an expert, because here she's talking about food import. Here she's talking about airport suspension. So she's not an expert in animal psychology, right? So that does not mean that she doesn't have good information here. But again, this is going to be one of those very controversial issues that you're going to have people on both sides that believe passionately in what they think is true, and they're not necessarily going to be telling us the truth. So here's Biology Online. Okay, so this isn't, let me see. Again, this doesn't actually tell us, this is really just kind of telling us about what happens. It's not trying to argue one way or the other. So again, this would take a lot more effort than just, again, the first things that you see, because I would assume that this place here is going to be for not having dolphins in captivity, right? That doesn't mean that they're wrong. It just means you've got to be aware of their bias. So here I would say there's not enough information to prove this one way or the other, right? Then he gives us Cecil the lion, and this is another potential false analogy, because he's trying to say that Cecil the lion being killed in a hunting trip by this dentist is no different than animals in captivity that want to be dead.